Hi and welcome to the Active Code podcast, brought to you by Aspire Active Partnerships. I'm Paul Griffiths, and joining me each week on the pod is Luke Johnson.
Aspire Active Partnerships is a community of like-minded business leaders who all believe that collaboration in the sports coaching and children's activity sector is essential for success. We've proven that working in collaboration does benefit business growth and essentially helps more children be more active more often.
To combat physical inactivity, we need organisations that are performing at their very best. Organisations will only operate to high standards if they are led well. So, if we can focus on developing high quality leaders throughout an organisation, not just at the top, customers will experience higher quality services, which means heightened enjoyment levels and increased levels of physical activity. And if we do this at an early age, we know that we can build the foundations for a more active, happier and healthier life. The Active Code investigates what it really takes to be a successful leader and how organisations can combat physical inactivity.
We won't be alone through this journey. We are joined by business owners and experts from our sector, as well as inspirational people from outside our industry. We'll understand the importance of physical activity to our guests, reflect on leadership experiences, and gain thought-provoking insights on how we can crack the Active Code and get more children more active more often. If you like what you hear, please leave us a rating and subscribe wherever you get your pods.
It takes a village to raise a child is a proverb that really resonates with our guest today. Dennis Kennedy is the founder of a company called Inspire Activity, a West Midlands-based organisation that connects people with activity providers through the Community Games project, swapping life in the corporate world to work with a core voluntary team and provide an environment where children and young people are inspired to grow in a safe and healthy environment has had its challenges, but we're in no doubt that those challenges are far outweighed by the positive outcomes. Dennis, welcome to the Active Code podcast.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I know you're a busy man. Could we start just by telling our guests, where did the concept of the Community Games project come from, please?
Yeah. A vivid memory of how it started, and I know the exact position of a road I was driving along as I was listening to a radio magazine show on BBC West Midlands, and they were talking about an initiative by LOCOG, so the London Organising Committee for the Olympic Games in London 2012. And this was back in March 2010, so about 11 years ago roughly. And they had this initiative called Community Games, where everything from a village hall to playing fields, they wanted people predominantly in the West Midlands, but also then further afield, to try and inspire people to be physically active and along the themes of the Olympic Games ideals and values. And the reason that the West Midlands was particularly chosen as a highlight or focus area was the West Midlands has the least physical participation of any county in the whole country. And I have been involved in sport, well, joking aside, I know it's a cliche, but since I could walk, but then very, very actively and seriously from the ages of about 12, 13, probably up until about 4 years ago. So I thought, well, that's rubbish. I'm going to do something about that. And without knowing what to do at all, I just set about creating what I thought of as a kind of a sports day meets village fete meets family afternoon meets inspire people to be active. And that became my version of a community games.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, Dennis. West Midlands is also a region we're also really passionate about having an impact in as well. Could you tell us a bit more about your professional journey so far, Dennis?
I can. So a bit varied. I'm kind of on my fourth career, and this one I'm on now is the one I hope I end on, which would be the Community Games. And I think I've hopefully got another 20 years of work in me at least. But I started off when I left school. I actually, at the age of 16, I turned professional as an ice hockey player. And I spent the next 5 years as a professional ice hockey player, I moved from London, where I'd had my secondary school years. I've lived all over the country, but I moved from London, and I moved to Telford, and I played for a team called Telford Tigers. I also played for England, which is my little claim to fame, even though I'm actually Irish, so that's a little bit odd, but I played for England. And then after about 5 years, although it's professional, it wasn't vast sums of money by any stretch of the imagination, although it was fantastic fun and quite a formative part of my life, to say the least. I then joined Xerox and spent the next 8 years with them. This is sort of shortening the story, but I would say that my Xerox years were the foundational years for me in terms of my professional skills and my professional life. I then went on to work for various other companies, WorldCom, Cable and Wireless, and ended up as the sales director of a small business based in Shrewsbury that used to do document image scanning. I'm not a technical person, but I've ended up working in technical companies for some reason. I don't really know why, but I've always been a relationship person, and I was always based in sales. I then left that career, so if you like, from ice hockey to commercial sales, and I started my own business as a business trainer. So for 11 years, exactly the same amount of time as it happens as I've been running community games, I was a business coach teaching people leadership, management, communication skills. Which ended up with me traveling around the world. I used to do a lot of work for DHL. I've worked in 23 different countries doing that kind of work. And then Brexit happened, and DHL took their foot off the pedal, and all my work for the following year was cancelled. And I had a couple of months of navel gazing, thinking, well, what am I going to do? I never thought I could do the community games as my living, because up until that point, it had been completely voluntary. And I decided to go for it, basically, and make the community games my living. Then COVID happened, and it's been a bit of an interesting journey, really. But the community games, I'm pleased to say today, the future is exceptionally strong and looks really good. So I've got a weird kind of journey. First was ice hockey, but after ice hockey, I played rugby for 12 years. I then was an obsessed cyclist for 12 years, done 10 stages of the Tour de France and cycled up every mountain you can think of in France. Then ran 6 marathons, then decided I was a really rubbish runner, and I haven't done much in the last few years. But so sport has always been in my life, and then I've had this sort of professional side to my life. And then all the things I've loved from both of those have kind of come together as a community games, which I kind of describe as a happy accident, because if you'd have asked a 16-year-old Dennis, what do you want to end up doing? I could never have imagined what I'm doing now. But what I do now, I absolutely adore. I really, really love it. So business and sport has accidentally collided to become a community games.
Awesome. So it's the perfect guest for the podcast. I had no idea that was your background as well. So yeah, that transition is really interesting. That transition from that professional sports environment into that business world, and no doubt there were skills and behaviours that you learned from that professional sporting career that helped you in the corporate world. And then I guess is there a transition then from into what you're doing now? So if you look back on that journey, is it all kind of aligned perfectly to actually get to that point of taking that leap into the community games and creating the project that you do so well now?
I think it has aligned perfectly, but in a sense, I think if I had one thing going for me in terms of my own skill set, is being able to recognise a doorway and knowing the right time to walk through it. Because the options haven't always been clear as to which way I would move forward and what to do. But by luck, chance or skill, I somehow seem to have managed to move through them in a nice way. The transferable skills from a professional sporting environment to a corporate environment, I would guess I'd probably put down to being totally professional and really hardworking. So we were a very, very professional team, and we were very, very good at what we did. this was back in the 80s. This might sound ridiculous to people now, but we'd wear suits, shirts and ties when everyone else would have jeans and T-shirts on. We'd have people carrying our bags for us when everyone else would just strut into an ice rink. And we were a proper team. I then joined a very, very professional elite workforce, which was Xerox. Now, rightly or wrongly, people may or may not like Xerox. I happen to love them. If you cut me in half, there's probably a red X running through me. The professionalism in that business was just total. So they definitely transferred. Then when I go through the years, I then end up in business training. And business training was a different kettle of fish, because you're now in a room, a mature learning environment with, 6 to 20 people maybe, and you have to treat them with respect and care and consideration, because otherwise they're just not going to do what you want to try and get through that day. So that's a completely then different skill set, which in itself blends into working with volunteers. Sure, we might talk about at one point, but my business model now is heavily dependent on volunteers, and couldn't exist without it. So there's a professionalism that makes what happens, it looks like gazebos being thrown up on a field, and all the logistics that make that happen. But then the skill sets from learning different skills around training have then helped me with volunteers. So I think there's been lots of pleasant overlaps that I could never have sat down and think, right, I'm now going to do business training so that I can work with volunteers in 10 years' time. It didn't work like that. It's kind of just happened as time has gone by. But I guess I've sought the correct nuggets out of what I've done to help me keep rolling forward.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned obviously your sporting background with ice hockey and rugby, cycling, a few marathons under the belt as well, Dennis. Yes. What does physical activity really mean to you?
So to me, I guess I've been a really, really poor sports person, and I've been fortunate to have some time at a fairly elite level as well. But physical activity to me, I suppose, is more about engagement with people and using your skills to the best of your ability. So the community games now is really about the spark at a grassroots level of trying to engage people into sport and activity. Whether they go on to become elite or not really doesn't matter to me. I'm almost happier if people become a pastimer or a hobbyist or just someone who enjoys it for the pure fun of it. I think that sport, whether you play in a team or do something individually, whether you win or lose, gives you a broad range of skills, but it also gives you an extension of friendships and purpose. Suddenly you find you can move your right arm and hit a ball and it goes over a net, and oh my God, I didn't know I could play tennis. And you've now just found out something that's a skill in your body that you didn't know you had that you can use. Or you can kick a ball or catch a ball or do a handstand or throw some. It doesn't matter what it is. I just think you can't go through school without, say, doing football or netball. It's almost impossible. But you can go through school without playing taekwondo or cheerleading or orienteering or slacklining or anything that involves a motor skill will give you a healthy extension in your life and give you that feeling of accomplishment and purpose. And I think that matters. And if I'm really deep, I think that makes the world a better place because it gives people healthier activities to follow and engage in and gives them something to do at the end of their working day or their weekend.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think they expose you to as many activities ideally at an early age. I still think that I could have been that Olympic pole vaulter, Dennis, but I never did pole vaulting at school, so you'd never know.
That's a great question, isn't it? You ask people at the party, what Olympic discipline would be yours? And then you see what answers people will come up with.
Yeah. And that whole journey around, we're talking sport or activity, but exposure to so many different activities is just so important. I think myself and Luke talk to people. I mean, sport gets brought up a lot in conversation, as you'd expect. And so, the traditional sports that we see in schools and through primary and secondary ages can put people off for life. So I think the Community Games project, I've seen it firsthand. It gives people of all ages, shapes, sizes, and the opportunity to take part in activities. They don't even know what they're called, let alone having participated in them before. And you talk about the social elements of it and the benefits that brings, and the friendships and the sense of purpose. Is that what you feel when you're active, or you have been active? They're the benefits for you as well.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I mean, how do I describe myself? I mean, I had an energy. I had a need to blow off that steam, to do something. The sports I've played happen to be very physical, but I'm actually not a confrontational person. But I like physical sports, so that in itself is a bit of an odd thing. So I guess that was something within me that I needed to do. If it hadn't been hockey, it'd have been rugby. If it hadn't been rugby, it'd have been something else. But I think it's very important people have that energy and they need to release that. So for me, it was a release. But then the social aspect of it is crave would be too strong a word, but I love the company of people. I love having conversation. I love listening to people. I love just having that banter, all of that engagement with other people. I just really like it, and sport for me has always delivered that, and also the planning and the journey and all of that. If I think about my cycling time, it's not just cycling up a hill. It might have been months of preparation before and all of that. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but the whole journey, because sometimes the actual day of the event isn't that good. But I don't mean my events, by the way, because they're all brilliant. I mean the events I might have done personally, but sometimes the day of the event might actually be a lot harder than you thought it was going to be, but the planning leading up to it was great fun. So it becomes all encompassing for me. So
yeah, talking of compassing, actually. So we had a conversation with an organisation who I think they're based in Belgium, probably about 4 or 5 months ago now, and they've got a product called Sport Compass. And Sport Compass is what they call an orientation tool. It's a really interesting concept because it's research led, data driven, and it helps children in the later years of primary life, so 8 to 10, I think it is. Choose the right sport for them based on what they like and based on what they enjoy and what they think they're good at, through physical exercises. So you're saying like you like contact, for example, and at the end of it, it kind of I think it's about 30, 40 or maybe less than that, probably 20, 30 questions. At the end of it, it says, driven by what you've given us and fed into the machine, if you like, here's what Sport Compass thinks that you could be particularly good at. So it's right, that's the first time I've come across something like that, and it's probably something for us to explore in a bit more detail and maybe get them on the pod, Luke, in future. But really interesting concept that is actually using tech, similar. Take the social element away from like the community games, but it's using tech in a way to actually help people discover what they could potentially participate in.
So I love the sound of that. If you take the premise that everyone can do something and they'll enjoy the something that they're doing, the degree of quality kind of doesn't matter. You don't have to be the best, and you certainly, I'm sure, won't be the worst either. But some people, dare I say it, football overtakes everything in this country. But not everyone's a great footballer. So what you end up with is children maybe have all the kit and they have all this and then all the chat. They watch every game so they can't be caught out with a conversation by not knowing a player's name in the playground and all of that stuff. But actually, football isn't really the best sport for them. They might be a great swimmer. They might be a great pole vaulter pool. There might be any different sports you can think of. But that kind of compass would make them feel more purposeful and capable. There must be a lot of people out there who think, oh, do you know what? I wish I was better at football. And maybe they're never going to be that great because there's only so many players that will actually make it.
Yeah,
not knocking football, don't get me wrong. It's obviously the game's favourite sport, the country's favourite sport.
Yeah.
There are other things that people could and maybe should do.
Yeah, I think there's an education piece as well there for parents, because I think a lot of parents get pulled into that mindset of, my son or daughter enjoys a particular sport. We're on football, so let's stick to football. They enjoy football, they watch it, they play it all the time, they join a club. typically from probably the age of 5 or 6. Back in my day, it was probably 11. It's probably, now that's quite late for children to start participating in sports and joining clubs and having structured coaching and games. But because they start at such an early age, they end up being kind of pulled into that, and the seasonal element kind of goes away from it. So there's no kind of football in the winter and athletics or cricket in the summer, or whatever it might be. So they just do football, and then they get to a particular age, normally in their teen years, where 15, 16 is probably that bridging that gap from playing with your mates in a competitive environment to right now you're in the big open world and you're playing against adults. I don't know the data, but the dropout must be pretty high. But then that young person is in danger of not being physically active because all they're used to and all their skill base and the skill set is around football. So having that opportunity at a younger age to say, right, I enjoy football and I can still play football and I will compete, but at the same time, I'm going to try a different sport, or I'm going to try swimming, an individual sport. I think it's so important. That's where I think the community games really does help and opens the eyes of not only children and young people, but the parents as well.
We deliberately make the community games so that people have to do lots of different things. So it's a very simple mechanism. We have a sticker card. You have to collect 8 stickers. Each time you do a different activity, you get a sticker, and then you can get a medal. And then what that does is it makes sure people try at least 8 different activities, one of which may be football, rugby, netball, whatever the more traditionally thought of sports may be. But out of the 8, there's bound to be something they haven't done before, like wrestling or taekwondo, and it's just a way. And then at the end, we ask people quite often when we hand out the medals, we say, what was your favourite activity? And very often they will say physical things like the martial arts or wrestling, or boxing, things like that. And I think that's because they just don't have the opportunity to do it. So in that moment in time, they thought, well, that's new. I didn't even know about this sport and I've got to try it and I quite like it. And they might then not carry on to do it, but they've at least now got a broader option of things that they might consider to do when they grow up. And I do think that's important, especially in the teenage years. They talk about the hard to reach groups, of which there's 5. Teenagers is one obvious hard to reach group because for obvious reasons, people are going through lots of different changes, physically, mentally, you name it. The last thing they want to do is to strut out onto a pitch and not look very good. So what they do is just not bother. They find a reason not to do it. Whereas if you can show them something else that they enjoy, there's more chance that they will carry on and do it. Could be badminton, could be anything. It doesn't really matter.
Dennis, you've clearly got a passion and you've been involved in sport and physical activity since you could walk, like you mentioned previously. But I guess you have worked with people that aren't interested in sport or physical activity or had any experience of it. Just coming away from the variety of sports and activities that you offer, are there any other tactics you've got to promote physical activity to others that aren't interested in it?
It's a difficult one, and I would say it's kind of, in my case, it's been accidental engagement. So how I would define that is you as a parent might take a child along to a games and you may have no intention whatsoever of trying a sport yourself. Sport is not on your radar. You've got a busy job, you've got a busy family life, you just don't have the time to think about sport, but you'd like your children to have a nice day out. Then actually you end up doing something with them. So there's an occasion there which happens frequently where parents will speak to someone of a club and actually think, you know what, I might do this myself. And that's been, anecdotally, we know that's been reasonably life-changing for a number of adults. But it's actually a really difficult thing to do. The best way we can do it is this accidental engagement. I'll try and define that even more now. Let's say you're going to so if you're interested in sport and there's a sports event, you'll go along because you're interested in sport. By definition, if you're not interested in sport, you won't go along. But by making it a kind of a family environment and in a neutral environment where people feel comfortable and safe. So, for example, our events are gazebos and bunting and nothing more flash. And that's deliberate so that when people arrive, they feel comfortable with the environment, nothing threatens them. So if I'm not interested in sport and I'm a brother, a sister, a grandparent, an uncle, whatever, and I just wander in because I'm there with Dave and Doris or whatever the children's names might be, then And all of a sudden, I think, oh, do you know what? I might just wander over and speak to that guy there. So the only way I've really been able to crack it is accidental engagement. I have a slight concern about the change of language. So in the sector, as I can determine at the moment, there almost seems to be a phobia or dislike or movement away from the word sport. And the word sport is almost becoming seen as a bad thing. And I guess what sport needs to do is maybe shout more about its benefits. So when I talk about purpose for people, engagement and friendships and things like that, there are multiple benefits like that of sport. People think of sport maybe as back in their secondary school years when it was hot and sweaty and they weren't picked to play in the first team and therefore they didn't like it. So now there's a movement towards calling things activity or active, or let's all go for a family walk. Great, fantastic. But you're probably not going to do that for an hour 4 times a week for the next 5 years of your life, which will probably give you the better health benefits. So I don't know how to tackle this. It's something we try and do through the accidental engagement of making our community games highly inclusive. But it's very hard to capture people directly. If you're not interested in sport, you're not going to go. I don't know if you've got any answers to that. You can help me maybe after this podcast, but it's certainly something we want to do. The idea of the community games is to inspire people of all ages and abilities to be physically active. That's our stated purpose.
Yeah, very similar to ourselves and those organisations in our network too. So how many people have you engaged since starting the delivery of the community games?
So I've actually done a little bit of rough maths this morning, and this is a rough number, but we've had 20 community games to date, 7 or 8 of which have been in Sutton Coldfield and the remainder now in other areas. And in Sutton, it's definitely over 50,000 people. And in total, I'm going to say approximately 80,000 people across 20 events will have attended a community games. And we've had, and don't ask me to name them all, we've now had over 100 different activities for people to try.
Brilliant. And going back to that variety, having 100 different activities to take part in, have a go at, that's surely going to have a big impact on those that currently don't love sport or activity. Surely, like you said, they'll find something that's for them.
Yeah, I really hope so. And I also think we're sort of sowing seeds of inspiration. So I might sow a seed today with you at a games where you try orienteering, and you might then go off in 4 years' time, go to university, and you might end up living in Cardiff. And then you get married, and then you're now 26, 34, whatever, and you think about orienteering. And your memory of orienteering going back to when you were 12 was a positive one. So you will now re-engage with orienteering because you think, actually, when I tried that in the past, I enjoyed it. So I'm now going to go and do it. And that could apply for any sport. So some of the seeds of inspiration can take root immediately, and you might join a club that day, which, by the way, is the purpose of the community games, is to connect local people with local sports providers. That's solely the intent of the community games. But if that connection doesn't take place there and then, it might still take place in the future. So that's where we're at.
Yeah. Touch on the past couple of years. What impact has the pandemic had on your organisation? And with, I guess, many face-to-face events being cancelled in 2020, how did you engage with your audience during that time?
With difficulty. So back at the beginning of 2020, I had, if I liken it to a cargo plane with 18 large crates on it that had taxied to the runway and was just about to take off and deliver those 18 crates like 2 weeks after each other throughout the year. And each one of those was a community games. It was due to be my most successful year of my life ever in the thing I'm most passionate about. And I get a phone call from traffic control to me as the pilot saying, sorry, mate, go and sit in the hangar for the next year and a half and do nothing, or year or whatever it was. And it took me about 3 months to realise that's what had happened. And in the May of 2020, it suddenly dawned on me that Sutton Games wasn't going to happen. And I was unbelievably upset. I mean, I don't mind saying, I mean, actually properly tearful, very sad, thought that all my work and all these years voluntarily and everything had just gone down the pan for the first time in my life through no fault of my own. It wasn't even my fault. I didn't invent COVID. It was nothing to do with me. And so I then started to hear this word pivot, how everybody pivoted, which is pretty hard to pivot. I hated the word pivot. It's pretty hard to pivot when your job is putting thousands of people in a field in close proximity to each other, and you're told that you've got to be in ones and twos or sixes, and you're not allowed to be together, and you certainly can't touch each other, and you certainly can't run in a rugby tackle pad or hold a ball. So it was pretty hard for me to pivot. So what we did was we created 40, I think it was, or 38 videos that we put onto our website, and to inspire people to go and be active. And that was the best I could think to do. And in a 3-month period, we had 40,000 visitors to our website, which sounds great, but it wasn't, because there was no connection. There's no connection between people at all. And the virtual world might work so well for some things, but for sport, it definitely isn't the be all and end all. I can show you how to throw a ball in a video. If you then throw the ball badly in your garden, all you're now doing is practicing how to throw a ball badly. You've got no one who can connect you with you or say, no, Dennis, not like that, mate. Just twist your hands a little bit this way, or lift your arm that way, or shuckle your leg this way, whatever it might be. There was just no connection. So if anything, it kind of deepened the sadness for me, because I built this thing called the Community Games that I clearly sure this comes across, I'm quite passionate about. And that just couldn't happen. And virtual for me, it might float other people's boats, but it's not my gig. It's not what I'd want to do. Then thankfully, we got to the beginning of last year. I lose track of the years now. COVID's thrown out all our mind calendars, hasn't it? What's when and what was when. And it was kind of like, we're on, we're off, we're on, we're off. And then we got to the point where we actually did have, first of all, the Aston Community Games, which is a new one at Aston Hall, then Sutton Games, and then Lichfield. So last year we finished with 3 successful, safely run, in COVID steps and all of that games. And I began to then think, actually, it's all going to be okay. We've weathered this storm. I've been able to financially crawl through it, and it has been a crawl, but I have. So yeah, never a short answer from me, by the way. You probably noticed already. I do like to talk. Hopefully that's good for a podcast. But,
absolutely. Look, it means that people hear less from me and Luke, Dennis. I'm sure that everyone's very appreciative of that. You talk about the tough times for a lot of organisations, in particular in that event space that you're in. But the future looks particularly bright locally. Obviously in Birmingham, we've got the Commonwealth Games coming in the summer, which is very exciting. Yeah. Does that present you with opportunities going forwards?
Massively. So perversely, COVID and the Commonwealth Games has helped me in 2 ways. COVID has helped me in so much as there's an appetite in communities this coming year for a lot of community games. The Commonwealth Games has helped me in so much as I now have funding from Birmingham City Council and Sport Birmingham to deliver quite a large programme of community games. So this year I have 13 community games taking place throughout South Staffs, North Birmingham, and the whole citywide area of Birmingham. And they start, the very first event I'm involved in is actually the test event for the Commonwealth Stadium, which is a school games in April. So that's foremost on my mind at the moment. Then we have our accessible games again, which we haven't spoken about, but we must mention, which, thank God, is happening again at the end of April this year. And then we roll on till October. So our last event is October the 22nd, I think, and our first event is April the 6th. And almost fortnightly in between, there is now a community games. So we are
Amazing.
fully on at the moment in planning mode.
Awesome. We might as well talk about the accessibility side of things. So I know you talked about how the games are inclusive, and I know that you do lots around inclusivity. So do you want to just give us a bit more information around that and the type of events that you've run in the past and where that's going in the future?
Yeah. Well, I'd love to. The interesting how it started. We got a contact from Australia, would you believe, literally the other side of the world, saying that a community just outside of Melbourne wanted to do their own community games in the run-up to the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. And they wanted to come and visit us because they'd heard about the Sutton Coldfield Community Games. Believe it or not, true story. So these people came and visited the community games, and we got on really well with them. They then did their own community games. They invited us, so my wife and I, to go to Australia to open their community games. We had a 2-week stay in Australia, staying with the family that we've met, which was brilliant because then you see a country in a different way and get shown different things. And whilst we were there, I tried wheelchair basketball. And it was a pivotal penny drop moment in my life. For the first time ever, I saw people looking at me in a different way to the stood up version of me. And it really struck me. People were nice, but I could see the way that people were kind of looking at me because I'm in a wheelchair now. And I could just feel this difference. Weirdly, I'm not very good at basketball. I was better in a wheelchair than I am stood on my feet at getting the ball inside the hoop. Don't know why that is, but I was. And I absolutely loved it. And I then spent a lot of time with the people who were doing the wheelchair basketball. And there's numerous different reasons for people having a disability or a learning challenge, etc., etc. And it struck me that it's a very underserviced area. So we came back from there, and I've said before in this podcast as well that our stated purpose, all ages, all abilities. But actually, we weren't really doing anything for people that might have accessibility requirements, whether that be physical or learning, etc. So we decided to do that, and we formed a bit of a partnership with Midland MenCap, and they supported us in doing things at a couple of Sutton games. But it dawned on us that the Sutton Coldfield environment, Windley Leisure Centre, whilst it's perfect for the established community games, for an accessible version, actually there's lots of grass, there's lots of curbs, there's lots of things that if you have a walking impediment or you're in a wheelchair, etc., it's not really conducive to you being able to engage in the sport and activities. So we formed a partnership with BMet College in Sutton Coldfield, where they have 3 different sports halls, a very large car park, pavements, nice flat spaces, everything that would make movement for anybody that might have a challenge easy. And we had our first accessible games, and it was a great success. We had about 250 people come along, which for this community, if I use that phrase very loosely, but for that community is a really nice turnout of people. And we had people climbing walls. We had someone who couldn't use their arms climbing a climbing wall. They were shown how to do it by just using their legs. Their parent is then crying because they never realised their child would ever be able to do something like that in their lives. That child is now a member of the climbing club in Birmingham and has been for the last 3 years as a result of the accessible games. So people, this thing I talk about people finding new skills and use of what motor skills they have, is it couldn't be more pinpointed or brought to life than an accessible games, where people might have more challenges than, say, you and I, but actually there is still something they can really do and enjoy. It's been very hard to fund it. It's not easy. People talk a lot about disability and inclusivity, etc., but then when you ask about money, there's none forthcoming. It sounds an awful thing to say, but I think that's because it's maybe not as attractive. It doesn't have as big an audience. It doesn't have as big a catchment. So people that invest the time in this space are really doing so almost as a vocation and as a passion. But it does happen. Walsall, University of Wolverhampton now provide us with their performance centre, and we do an accessible games each October as well. And this year we're also doing one with the Birmingham Women and Children's Hospital with patients of oncology and haematology. So that's people under the age of 18 that have cancer or blood-related diseases. And that one we'll be doing in May at King Edward's School in Birmingham. So this year, the plan for accessible games, there's only 3. I say only 3 because back in 2019, I had hoped by now there'd be 6 or 7. But obviously, things have got in the way that we can all imagine, so that hasn't quite happened. But I do hope that that is going to be the case moving forward, that there'll be this kind of double run of community games and then also accessible community games.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's amazing, Dennis. So you've got a very busy year coming up, haven't you? You touched on the funding side of things there. Would you mind sharing with us how you've got around all these kind of headaches around staging these community events and getting them funded? Because I know initially they were free to access, weren't they? Which was incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd love to. Is the first thing I'd say. So first thing I'd say is there is no funding for the community games that is public money. And I can't state that clearly. Public funding. Well, apart from actually the ones this year that Birmingham City Council are funding, of which is 7 or 8. But up until now, there's never been any public funding. And I make that point really clearly because I think people think it's somehow council funded, whether that be Lichfield or Sutton or Birmingham, and it isn't. So all of the money that's been raised to make these things happen has been me, which basically leans back towards my sales life and sales career of being comfortable walking into a commercial environment and talking to a business about this idea where they can sponsor the games and have their good name associated with something that's liked in the community, and they can show themselves in a different way, a bit of corporate social responsibility. So right from the very start, we had some funding from the Sutton Coldfield Charitable Trust, I'll come back to in a second, and then I went and sought sponsors. Our earliest sponsor was Green & Co, the local estate agents, who have been nothing short of fantastic ever since they first joined us. And then from there, they kind of set a precedent, which allowed me to go and speak to other commercial companies and say, would you become a sponsor? So essentially, I've raised the money through sponsorship from companies and sometimes funding. On the funding side, if I go back to Sutton Coldfield Charitable Trust, in the very first year, and they've remained the funder until this day, but in the very first year, their funding was very high, and the amount of money, and without their support, the community games would never, ever have been able to take off. Because in the first year, it cost £25,000 to happen, and they've provided the majority of that money in the first year. But here we are 10 years later, and 80,000 people have now been to a community games. So hopefully that's money very, very well spent. Quite cheap when you think of some of the programs you hear about nationally that cost millions. We're really talking pennies for what it is that I do. But basically, we raise all the money ourselves. I say we, there's 4 of us now.
Yeah, incredible. I think there's some of the impact you're having, and the more you're talking about this, I'm like, why isn't this everywhere in the country? And why aren't organisations like Sport England talking to you, or you talking to Sport England about the impact you're having? And we'll come on to that in a short while.
Conversation for me and you after, Paul.
But yeah, I'll come on to it in the future, because I think it's almost like there's the work that you've put in over that last decade, and the issues you faced with the pandemic and all of the positive stuff you're saying here, it's ticking a lot of boxes, and you think there's a big need coming out of the pandemic for higher engagement, more engagement with across all communities, and it seems like the perfect plan. But we'll come on to that later. We'll come on to that.
Dennis, community games relies heavily on volunteers.
Yep.
So do many other projects. Do you think we often underestimate the importance of volunteers when it comes to engaging people in physical activity?
I don't know is the truthful answer. Part of me wants to say no, and part of me wants to say perhaps. I think perhaps the public perception might be that volunteers don't really exist, or there aren't that many, but there is actually a huge number of people that give their time voluntarily. I saw a statistic not too long ago that says that on average, 15% of adults will volunteer to support a minimum of 2 events in their community each year. So that actually, if you do the maths, that's a lot of people are volunteering. If you scratch under the surface of community and society, you will find hundreds of people, salt of the earth, inverted commas, who are making things happen. And they're doing it just because they believe in it. They're not doing it because of money. They're not doing it for any real gain. Maybe they get a little bit of an ego boost, but in reality, there's no real gain from it. They just do it. In my case, I have been blessed with a phenomenal group of volunteers without whom the community games really couldn't run, to the point where now this is a group of people who have families and jobs who almost run the community games slicker than I could. We did one in Lichfield where I'd hurt my back and I had to sit in a chair and I couldn't do anything. And it was our fastest ever breakdown at the end of a community games, which I'm reminded of quite often, because if you take me out of the picture, it happens a bit quicker. So the volunteers are brilliant. So I personally am highly aware of volunteers, and I worry that I don't do enough to thank people, let them know. I'm going to use a non-business word, let them know that they are loved, because they are. Although I am a tiny micro business, it's more a family than a business. If I was after money, I'd probably be doing something else than doing this. So I think volunteering isn't underestimated by me, and in reality, I think it's unsung. I don't think it's underestimated. I think it's unsung. I think it happens, but I don't think people realise to the extent to which it happens. No.
What do you think we can learn from other sectors to help combat physical inactivity? Thinking back to your other experiences in your career, what can we learn from other sectors, do you think?
I thought about this. The only thing I really thought of was kind of better communication or benefit sharing. If I use kind of business language, I'm not sure if the value of the benefits of activities are clearly understood by the recipients or promoted or communicated by the people that help to do it in the first place. And therefore it becomes a little bit devalued. It becomes a little bit of a nice thing to do, or but it's not maybe seen as important. I mean, we've seen, and you guys obviously work very hard to change this, but there's been a change in focus on the importance in activities in schools from what I've perceived from when I was a child to now. And the amount of people that are engaged in it. My wife's a teacher, so I have an understanding of the mechanisms within the school of how it was once delivered and how it's delivered now. And I think it's somehow become slightly undervalued, but the benefits, well, sport made me as much of the person, if not more the person I am today, than anything I ever learned academically. I don't think I'm thick by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't think I'm super intelligent either. But either way, academic wasn't quite a thing for me. There's no bad story here. I wasn't expelled, none of that sort of stuff. I was just a normal kid, normal school life. Loved school, nothing against it. I learnt more in the sporting world. And so for me, it needs more importance. And I think other industries manage to push themselves and sectors more to the forefront of people's thinking than perhaps the sports industry and sector does.
Do you think that's to do with the marketing of the benefits?
Yes, in short. What people tend to see is the professional sports world. So I've talked before about from grassroots to elite. What we'll see is the professional sports world, and dare I say it, and risk losing lots of friends on the podcast. Not everything you see in professional sport these days is great, but actually there's benefits. How many people are going to make it to elite sport? 1%, 2%. I don't know what the statistics are, but where does that leave 98% of us, many of whom are actually having wonderfully fulfilled lives, playing in their local community club or their local county club or whatever, and somehow that isn't brought forward. Dare I say it, that's one of the goals of the community games, is to allow local clubs to promote their offering in the local community, because they might run a brilliant, I don't know, basketball club, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're good at marketing or getting people. But if you join that club, you might have a new healthy extension that lasts for the rest of your life through friendships you make. And so I think there's a lack of marketing, a lack of promotion of the benefits of being active in sport. That's about as much as I could think of that maybe other sectors do better than the sector that we are in.
I think the links, you've mentioned clubs again there, Dennis, the links to clubs, more so than ever before. Clubs are no doubt struggling. I've been involved with a couple of community clubs who are doing okay post-pandemic, but as we go forwards, the number of clubs that will be struggling because they rely on volunteers, smaller clubs, they need income, they need people coming through the door as such. So again, another big tick in the box from community games is the fact that these club links are being developed, and it's helping boost not only participation in these activities, but it's helping boost the future of these clubs, which is imperative for every community.
Yeah, and to be very clear, I don't mean to be remotely critical or negative about any clubs or the industry. It's almost an inescapable fact. If you are good at one thing, chances are you aren't going to be great at something else. So if you're good at running a club and you've honed your skills, you've become a coach, you've got a body of volunteers, there we mentioned volunteers again, you've got a body of volunteers around you that make this club happen. You don't have the time when you've also got a job probably and a family life and other commitments in your life. You don't actually have the time to suddenly become a professional marketeer as well. So it's almost an inescapable fact that you can only be good at so many things. So I'm not being critical of clubs at all, but I do sincerely hope that as we come out of all of this, that community games enables clubs to re-engage with people. Essentially, we're trying to facilitate connections between people. Sport club meets person. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and there's some really good support for clubs. I know Simpspa through Sport England funding, they've got a digital marketing hub. It's a project that's been running now for about 4 or 5 months that takes the basics of digital marketing. So whether that's creating a website or creating your social channels, there's more and more stuff coming online now that really is there to support clubs to take it to another level. So it's great to see that that kind of stuff's out there, but we still need people coming through the doors and events like this. Just to kind of round off the podcast now, Dennis, what is the future for the community games beyond 22?
Beyond 22. So I would hope all of the community games we do this year, next year, and every year thereafter. So that would leave us with a programme of approximately 13 community games. Is in Sutton and Lichfield this year. For the first time ever, we charged. And that went okay. No one complained. And it was only £2.50 a ticket. But I can't tell you how much thought went into the idea of charging, let alone how much, because it's always been free. This year, Sutton and Lichfield will still have a charge. Every other event will be free to attend. The following year, I don't have all the funding. So somehow I've got to make it sustainable. I hope to do that through sponsorship, but some areas, some of the more deprived areas that this year will have a community games, there aren't even companies really there. There isn't even really a corporate presence to fund it. So I might have to introduce ticket fees. So I hope the following year and every year thereafter to have 13 games and more. But I'd still like to make it broader and bigger. And I'm hoping this year, my tiny little business is growing. There'll be 5 of us this year, but none of us, apart from myself, 4 people are part-time and me full-time. So it's a tiny, tiny business that makes all this happen. And then volunteers support the events. But that's a growth in numbers of people from when it used to just be me. So I'm hoping that I have a bit more space this year to work more on the strategic side of things that allows the sustainability in the following years. And who knows what will come out of this year. My first thought is to deliver the games as brilliantly as I possibly can this year, to hopefully then engage further support and partnerships in the years that follow. And that's the strategy, if you like, at the moment.
Yeah. What's the dream?
What's the dream? Oh. Well, so you've caught me out with a question. Do you know what I'd love to do? I'd absolutely love to do this, and I still keep thinking I can do it. I would like to do what I'm going to call the Glastonbury version of a community games. So I would like to take over a massive space and create an annual event that would have all of the 100 activities we've ever once have, a station in this space, perhaps a little bit of music and drinking, because there's no alcohol at our events and there isn't really music, but perhaps it becomes a little bit more festivalish. But really the main component is sport. So I would like a whacking great big field from a farmer with loads of parking and loads of activity. And as a family and friends or individuals, you go along and you camp for the weekend and you spend your whole weekend just having this wonderful time, and it'll still look like gazebos and bunting, but on a huge scale. So that's what I'd love to do. That's the dream. That's our dream.
You sold it to me, Dennis. I'm there. Is there a babysitting service as well?
There'll be a babysitting service. I mean, God knows. I need to start planning now, don't I, for 2027 or something. I don't know. But,
I love it. I think it's great. It's always good to have that kind of aspiration, and personally, I think it's a great idea. It really is. You never know. There could be someone listening that goes, you know what? I know someone with a massive field. We can get it going.
Yeah, the problem I have is not so much the field. I reckon I can find a field, but it's always money.
Yeah,
because you need to know you can pay for an amount of things beforehand, before you know what your attendance will be, and that's the mystery of trying to run events. You know, it's you never quite know always what's going to happen, and you're always like living on the edge of a gamble or a good thought or a reasoned bit of logic, and then it goes wrong, and then you've still got to make it happen. So on a big scale, that would be even harder. But hey, what's worse? I can get it wrong.
Yeah.
but I'll have had a go.
Dennis, if listeners wanted to enhance their business skills, do you have any books, podcasts, or people that you'd recommend?
I do. I have one book in particular, and I have 2 subjects. So the book I would recommend is what's called a leadership fable, and a fable being a story. So this is a story, a fictional book, but it basically tells the story of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I could not recommend the book more. So there are 5 dysfunctions of any team. The first one is trust. The second one being conflict, then commitment, accountability, and attention to results finally. And this book, which is called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, the author is an American guy called Patrick Lencioni, Lencioni. And I no leader would be harmed by reading this book. I taught leadership skills and business skills for 11 years, as I've mentioned. The one thing to counteract or contradict what I've just said, the one thing I was told right at the start of all of that is there's 10,000 books on leadership, and there isn't a single one that can tell you how to be a leader. There is no identikit that one person can follow. And leadership comes through your own personal journey and how you choose to use those skills, and in how you work with other people. This book in particular, I love because it brings in a whole host of different people, puts it into very easy, it's a page turner, it's not a complicated book to read, it's not a hard read at all, but it puts in line these very important steps of having a team that works well. And if we're talking about leadership, then ultimately there's a form of team or community or something that would fall underneath that leadership. And these 5 areas support that. So that's the book I would recommend. The 2 subjects I would recommend is, first of all, listening, and second of all, communication skills. Of everything I learned going around the world for 11 years, the 2 biggest subjects that people would benefit their life by at any level in any business is, first, listening better, secondly, communicating better. What we all do today is we will go onto the webulator and we will spend 30 seconds looking at a subject and we'll become a fast expert. So I would challenge anyone who really wants to be serious about their own professional growth to spend at least 10 minutes on the webulator, and that 10 minutes will probably become an hour or more as you start to look at a subject. And listening in particular is a very interesting one. I'm deaf in my left ear, an old ice hockey injury, so I've had to work really quite hard on my hearing throughout life, and I enjoy listening to people. But listening is the one skill that's just taken for granted. You go through school and you are never, ever taught about listening. You might, in your professional career, do something on listening, and normally it'll look and feel like a half-day course at best. And that's it in your life for most people. But it's such a skill, it's untrue. And then communicating, how we communicate with others so that we're heard and understood, because people interpret what you say in multiple different ways, and there's ways that you can be a clearer communicator. He says, just as he gets a frog in his throat, bit of emotion coming in. So listening and communication skills. It's not a book, it's just life skills. And if we relate that to leadership, you will only be a better leader if you listen to people more and communicate with people better. And read that
Absolutely.
book.
Yeah, I think listening is definitely overlooked a lot of the time. And thank you for that book recommendation. What was the title of the book again?
The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
Perfect.
I've got it here in front of me, so I remembered the exact name.
Excellent. And the moving on to the $1 million question, Dennis, what one thing do organisations in our sector need to do to crack the active code and get more children more active more often?
Just to be clear, if I answer this correctly, do I get $1 million?
Potentially, it depends who's listening. You might get the Glastonbury Games.
Yeah. Mars, Nestle, or someone will come in and sponsor me for free.
Yeah.
What one thing can organisations do? Understand your values and benefits and shout louder. So it goes back to that, I guess, what I was saying before. I mean, why engage? What's in it for me? What's the WIFM? What do I get from this? What is in it from me? But put it into language that people can relate to. The average person, the ordinary person, the everyday person, how that they can relate to. So to shout louder about the benefits of activity that it will bring in all the areas of your life, not just health, mental health. Mental health is a huge subject at the moment. Not just mental health, physical health, lifelong learning, all sorts of things. Just gives you more purpose in your life. Shout louder.
Cool, thanks, Dennis. And I think certainly the benefits of the community games has really come through in today's pod. Really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to myself and Liv today. I just love that we've shared the story and your story around the impact that sport has had on your career and how it's enhanced your skills, and then how you've gone full circle pretty much and on that journey now to utilise those skills that you've learned in the corporate world and from your professional sporting background and when you participated recreationally to actually have that impact on other people. I think it's been fascinating. I think the environment you've created for people to excel in themselves and to participate in and discover what activity or sport suits them is brilliant. Creating that comfortable, safe space for families. The accidental engagement, love that, and making events that are totally inclusive and linking people to clubs and clubs to people, I think is often overlooked. And to have run 100 events, I mean, over 80,000 people, you said?
Well, 20 events, but yeah, 80,000 people.
80,000 people is just incredible. So, I know there's been struggles over the pandemic, but there's a huge need for communities to come together. And I think that will naturally happen over the next 12 months. And with the Birmingham Commonwealth Games in 22 in the summer hitting our shores, I'm sure the future is really bright for you and your organisation, and extremely exciting. And myself and Luke, no doubt, will be looking out for the big festival when that's announced. And you've got less than 5 years to make that happen, because my kids will be too old then. So,
well,
thank you, Dennis.
I'd love to do it next year, but that would give me about 18 months from now, loosely, to make it happen. So, so if you'd like to come on board as our first sponsor, Paul, then, game on.
Let's take that one off the podcast.
You can edit that out.
No, thanks for your time, Dennis. Really appreciate it, and take care, and best of luck to you and the community games going forward.
Thank you very much, guys.
Join us next time for the Active Code podcast. Remember to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with us on Twitter @aspire_partners and find out more about us and the network at www.aspireactivepartnerships.co.uk.